This podcast episode discusses suicide. Listener discretion advised. If you or someone you know is experiencing suicidal thoughts or emotional distress, please seek professional help. More information in the show notes.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
Don't you understand, George? It's because you were not born.
Film church.
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother.
David, this is nice. Sorry, that was my dog. Kind of ruined that take. Hey, David, this is nice. This is not real.
Hello, and welcome to Film Church Radio. This is the podcast that treats cinema as a religion. It's Sunday. I'm Brandon.
I'm Lewis.
And we're here to talk about movies. Each week, Lewis and I alternate picking a film for us both to watch and discuss. But today, we have returning to Film Church Radio an elder from a previous episode, Mr. Mitch Norris. Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you for being here.
Glad to be back.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you back again, finally. I've been looking forward to this.
Yes, and elder is a proper description of me. I'm turning 30 this month, so I'm doing that completely, 100%.
We're right there with you, man. We went through it a couple of years ago, so.
Does it hurt?
It does, yeah. I'm reminded every morning. So what have you brought for us today to discuss it?
We are going to be talking about the end of the tour with Jason Segel, Jesse Eisenberg. It is one of my favorite A24 films, for sure. And I feel like it flies under the radar a lot. So the subject matter is something that I care a lot about. So David Foster Wallace was pretty influential on me a couple of years ago, but I'll get into that more.
Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
I mean,
so-
I didn't know it was an A24 film. Did it even say it at the beginning of the movie?
Yeah, it caught me off guard this time.
Yeah,
I
it
didn't
did,
catch it.
I believe. Yeah, it's definitely in the trailer as well.
Okay,
It's pretty prominent. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure they show it at the beginning.
Yeah.
Title.
So obviously this film, like you said, is influential to you. I had seen it before you picked it, but it's been a few years. And I know Lewis is kind of same boat, right?
Yeah.
So this was a really good rewatch. I'm excited you picked it. Of course, we'll get into it more here in a little bit. But of course, if you're new to the show, be sure to listen to the end of the episode where Lewis is going to reveal what we're watching next week. So that'll be at the end. And also, if you want to catch Mitch on our previous episode, it was episode 49, which was a part of our Noir-vember. It was part one of our Noir-vember last year, where we talked
Thief.
about noir films. Yeah, Thief.
Yeah.
The Michael Mann film. That was a great conversation. What else can listeners do, Lewis?
Well, listeners can obviously go back and find that episode and all of our back episodes that are streaming on all good podcast platforms. We'd like to say thank you to everyone who has done that so far or been following along with the show. If you're new to the show and are enjoying it, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when a new episode is available. This is a film church, so surprisingly, we post episodes on Sundays. And if you really, really enjoy the show, share it with your friends. How can you share this show, I hear you ask? Tell them to go to filmchurchradio.com or any good podcast platform. And we are also on all social media platforms at Film Church Radio. You can leave us a message, send us a comment, all that kind of stuff. And we do post extra content on YouTube and other social media. Our Spotify now has video. So if you unlock your phone and look down right now, you may be able to see us. Weird. Hello. Yeah, that's what you can do. What we'll do now is, before we talk about the end of the tour and get into our feature presentation, we do our hymns section, which has looked a little bit different for the last few weeks, and it's still not quite in its familiar form. With Mitch being here, though, this is a great chance to just ask just general film-related questions. So, Mitch, first of all, how are you doing, and what films have you been watching recently?
I am doing pretty great. In terms of film that I've watched recently, I just saw Across the Spider-Verse last night.
Yes.
I enjoyed that very much.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. I'm trying to think. It's been a minute for me at least since I've been to the movies since last night because like usually I go like once or twice a week. So I had like a week or two like hiatus there. So I saw Across the Spider-Verse and before I recently saw the new Evil Dead Rise, which I enjoyed
Yeah.
a lot.
Wasn't it great?
So yeah, it was. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was. I felt like it paid a lot of homage to other sources that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
Just kind of like a real tribute to the franchise and other horror franchises. So I enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah.
Did you guys see Spider-Verse yet?
Yes, we did. Yeah,
Mhm.
well, we did back to back because we're big like Spider-Man fans. So, like one of our first episodes was right after No Way Home came out, and that's like the
Hmm.
longest episode we've done. It's like 3 hours or something, like
Yeah.
2.5 at least.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we're big like Spider-Man fans. So like we've kind of like we don't normally do like new movies, but I think we're gonna kind of keep this tradition where we always talk about the new Spider-Man stuff because we even talked about Morbius for Film Church Radio.
Right.
So we ended up because like Into the Spider-Verse came out before we started the podcast. We did a whole episode of Into the Spider-Verse 2 weeks ago, and then we did Across the Spider-Verse last week. Um,
Right.
and yeah, man, it was so
Mhm.
so good. Like I've seen it 3 times now, and um, the first time I saw it, it was just like overwhelming. Like there's so much going on in the movie. There's so much to catch. But also like the story of Miles is like a slow burn.
Mm,
And because of that, I think I wasn't quite enjoying it as much the first time I watched it because I just wanted to get to Miles.
hmm.
Whereas like the second and third time it was like, okay, I know where this is going now. I can just sit back and enjoy all of it. And it's so fun. I mean, just like front to back,
Yeah.
good
I definitely
entertainment.
feel like I need to see it again because it was like so much being thrown at me at one time.
Yeah, yeah,
Very, very busy film, but just gorgeous film as well.
yeah,
And I really thought like Gwen was a standout character this time because
for
it really
sure.
sort of
Yeah.
opens up with her story. I was like, wow, this is really riveting. Like this.
Yeah,
That's I feel like the cold open there takes like what? It's like a 10 or 15 minute
Yeah.
yeah,
cold
it's
open
yeah,
before
yeah,
the like what you were saying before all the Miles stuff like it started. But I was really intrigued with everything that they were doing. Um, but yeah, great film. Um,
I know that I saw a lot of posts from you when Guardians of the Galaxy 3 came out. You were a big fan. Now Lewis hasn't seen it, so we don't want to
okay,
Yeah.
no
spoil
spoiler zone.
anything,
Yeah.
but did
I did
that
see it 3 times.
okay, okay,
Okay.
Yeah,
nice.
yeah.
What without giving away spoilers, what was that? Why was that experience like so good to you
So
or important
okay,
or yeah.
so one of the issues that I have with the MCU in general is that they tend to feel like filler or setup for the next thing that's coming.
Mm,
And what I like about the Guardians trilogy is that for the most part, they don't feel like that. They feel more self-contained.
yeah.
Like the drama is smaller usually. Like it's about their personal issues, and I feel like they tapped into that times 100 with this. And James Gunn was like, "Look, this is the ending to a trilogy. It's going to be totally self-contained. It's about these characters and these characters alone, and what they've been through." And I thought it was just like a really nice breath of fresh air
Yeah.
in that cinematic universe. And the heart, like it's very heartfelt, and you can tell that James Gunn is kind of like a big softy when it comes to this stuff. And it's just like he just he just James Gunn's all over the place. Like he's. I don't know if you would call him an auteur, but like he definitely brings his traditional style here and amplifies it to the max. And I think what I really appreciated was that it does feel like not a part of that MCU fabric where everything is starting to look the same.
Yeah.
It very much has its own voice. And I say that if a film can make me like laugh and cry within a short amount of time, like several times, then it's done its job. So I without spoiling anything, I would say probably just because the style and the heart is just got to me. Like it's also really really funny while simultaneously being one of the more darker entries. The MCU is still one of the funniest. So like it's a dichotomy, but it's a great balance. So
Are you a big like DC fan? Like, how do you feel about James Gunn taking over?
I I'm probably more familiar with the DC lore than than the Marvel lore, just because I grew up on like Justice League and Batman and Superman stuff. So right now I honestly I have a higher opinion now that I've seen Guardians 3. To be honest, I trust that he's at least going to put some real time and effort into planning out the DCU, just simply because it's something that is notoriously known for not being so well put together over the last few years. So I think that he has that in mind, probably. I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm cautiously
Yeah.
optimistic. I know the next project that he's doing, I think, is the Superman. I forget what the name of it is. Superman Legacy.
Legacy, yeah.
Legacy, that's right. So I've seen some posts from him where he was talking about how much it means to him. Like he started writing the script on his dad's birthday and how it's very important. So, I haven't seen much from James Gunn that doesn't incorporate a lot of like I would say like sophomore humor maybe and stuff like that. So I'm just cautiously optimistic. Like, what are you going to do with these properties, man? Like, I know you have the heart to do it and you care about it, but like, how is the finished product going to turn out? So like, I'm cautiously optimistic. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, it can't go much more wrong than it has, to be honest. So
Yeah.
we'll see where he takes it.
Yeah. I mean, how are you feeling on the flip side with the MCU in terms of, I know that, Guardians is great, but we've talked about it a lot, how I'm heavy into like just, I don't want to watch another Marvel film for a while. Like I'm
Yeah,
so
no,
tired.
I agree. I was pretty much at that point when Guardians was released because I went ahead and I saw Quantum Mania. I regretted it.
Yeah.
And so that was one of those things too. I was like, I'm probably gonna wait for Disney Plus or whatever. And then I got kind of talked into it, went to see it with a friend, and I'm like, nope,
Okay.
shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
Didn't like it. Because like really, it was Thor Love and Thunder that did it for me too, because I just thought that movie was so like and that's the thing. I like Taika Waititi, so it's hard to say because I like Ragnarok, but I just did not enjoy that film. I felt like every moment was a joke, even the moments that should have
Yeah.
been more serious. Like it was hard to take it serious at all.
Mm.
So I was pretty much tapped out at that point. I may have mentioned this too, but like I didn't enjoy Multiverse of Madness as much as some other people did, even though I'm a big Sam Raimi fan.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because of the Sam Raimi-ness of the movie; it was more of the Marvel-ness of the movie. So yeah, I'm kind of like not really invested in the MCU, and I think that's why I enjoyed Guardians 3 so much because it felt like a swan song. Like it felt like this is the end to an era rather than here's what's coming next. And I think that's why I appreciated it more so than any other Marvel film in recent years, except maybe for like, Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And but I'm pretty much tapped out and like not to bring anything controversial into it, but like the whole Kang thing and like recasting that, it just seems like it's kind of crumbling and
Yeah.
I did not like Quantum Mania at all, so I'm not excited for that story,
Yeah.
arc. So I don't know.
I'm in
We'll
the
see.
same boat, and I think yesterday at time of recording they announced that they're pushing it back, the new Avengers films a little bit, and it's like 5 years away. And it's like,
Wow.
I saw lots of people being like, are we still going to be like hyped for this in 5 years' time?
Yeah,
When
it's hard.
5 years ago, the hype was so real, and now it's like, we're going through that fatigue. It's just, there's going to be a
Yeah,
flop at some point.
it's a lot of rebuilding to do because they like you said they ended an era with Endgame and now
Yeah.
with a lot of these other characters too. Um, and they've been introducing a lot of new characters since then,
Mhm.
and they could pull it off for sure because if you think about I mean they could also very easily not pull it off, but if you think about I mean there's also a new generation of kids watching these movies, but like if when you think back on like Iron Man and Thor and Captain America, at least in the town that I was in and I worked at a movie theater when those movies came out, like just with those three movies people were like, really,
Yeah.
another superhero movie, and then the first Avengers came out and like some people liked it, but a lot of people were like, it was okay,
Uh-huh.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
It took time like to build up that hype to Endgame. It took
Yeah,
10
absolutely.
years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like pushing it back is probably the right choice for more reasons than one, but also to recreate hype for these characters.
Yeah.
And it's probably over for us. Like we're probably not gonna be into it like um some younger people.
Yeah.
We're in our
Yeah.
We're
30s
getting
now.
old.
Yeah, we're getting old. We're getting old. Yeah,
It's like
but
this movie
like,
is like 5 or 6 years in the future. It's like we're almost 40. It's like time
yeah,
for the next
exactly.
Avengers movie.
Yeah, I mean by the
It's like
yeah
maybe
we
we're a little bit too old to be.
I mean we probably will be in our 40s by the time they get to because they're building a new Avengers like trilogy, kind of,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
to that. So by the time they get to that third Avengers movie, yeah, we're gonna be in
Yeah.
our 40s, dudes. Like,
Yeah.
it's gonna be a weird
That's
time.
insane to think about.
Yeah.
Mm.
But yeah, definitely experiencing the superhero fatigue. And I'll just say one more thing about that really quickly. Um, the only reason that I am hyped about the Flash movie is because Michael Keaton. Like I just
Oh yeah.
like the Michael Keaton Batman films were so
Yeah.
influential when I was growing up. The first superhero movies that I ever saw, like even before Christopher Reeve Superman, but those two are kind of neck and neck. But despite all the controversy and the superhero fatigue, like I'm there just to see him back on screen.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've said this before, like I may be a liar this time as well, but after that I'm tapped out. But then
Mm.
I'm sure something else will come
Yeah.
along.
Something
I'm
will
like,
come.
oh no, I have to see that. But like,
Yeah.
no, I'm really tapped out this
Yeah.
time, But
Yeah.
because like, where else could they go with it,
I mean, well, when me and Lewis had this conversation on Film Church, I don't know, a few months ago, I don't know when, but we were like, they could. I mean, with the way Disney has been able to negotiate things with Sony, they could start negotiating things with Warner Brothers and crossing over MCU and DC. I mean, yeah, it's like where
Why
else could
not?
they go?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like
yeah, why not? It
Iron
always
Man
sounds good.
versus Batman, or like
Yeah.
It always sounds good on paper, and like crossovers, like they have really cool comic covers. But
Yeah.
like once you get into them, they're usually lame. Like I have
Yeah.
this Batman Spider Man crossover comic book, and it has this awesome cover where they're both like crouched on a rooftop, and the story is just so lame. It's just like you thought it would be better, but it's not. So like I don't know. I don't know. I just like all those universes mixing and like Disney owning anything. I mean, it's just like everything is just like, well, now you could just bring like Star Wars into the MCU and do all that stuff. What does
yeah,
it matter anymore?
Yeah.
They're just gonna make a movie one day called The Movie, and it's gonna have
Yeah.
like every property you can
Yeah.
imagine. It's gonna be like Ready Player One on crack or something.
yeah. Well, that was
It's
the
like
great
every
thing about
property.
like the Lego movie was like all the
Yeah,
crossovers and
Yeah.
stuff. Like I
yeah,
rewatched
for
Lego
sure.
Batman recently, and like they've got like
So good.
Sauron as one of the
Yeah.
villains,
Yeah.
and like Voldemort. Like it's pretty great.
That movie
Yeah.
is so great.
Yeah.
I think the good thing about like comic books in general is just that they can start a new run and just like do something different. Whereas Marvel is kind of they're constantly backing themselves in a corner.
Right.
It's like the stakes can't get any higher. It's not like they can just kind of start again and be like, okay, this is the biggest threat we've ever faced, because it's not.
Yeah.
So it's just constantly just like, it doesn't mean anything, like you said, and especially with Thor: Love and Thunder, like nobody is safe from death now.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't. It means nothing. There's no stakes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So yeah.
Again, bring it back to Guardians. That's why I liked the personal nature of the story. Like I think it's important to like especially when you've had like stories like Endgame and stuff in this cinematic universe, you need to take it back and dial it back to those personal stories, because like Iron Man and Thor, like those films, the early films we were talking about, are still very kind of personal films. Like it's about like Tony dealing with the idea that he's kind of a jerk, and like overcoming those things about his life and becoming a better person. Same thing with Thor, like improving his worthiness and stuff. Very simple themes. And I think it's very important to get back to that somehow in order to create a hype for something much bigger, because we were much more connected with these characters when they were outside of that overarching plot. Right. So I don't know how they're going to do that, but I think it's very important to like get back to that somehow and tell very much more personal stories.
Yeah.
I think is what I prefer.
Yeah. I think it says a lot when like one of my favorite like superhero teams is the Fantastic Four, and they kind of leaked the cast, and I was like, no, like please, like don't go to Marvel, don't ruin it. Even though for me it's like a dream. Like it's a dream cast, but it's still like, oh, what are they doing?
Did they leak the official cast?
It's not like official, but apparently it's like Adam Driver, Margot Robbie, Paul Mescal, who was in After Sun that I loved, and then Daveed Diggs.
Wow.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like pretty
How did
close
they get
to perfect.
Adam Driver?
Money, dude.
Yeah.
It's all money.
That's so crazy.
But then all these people are just like talking about how it doesn't mean anything anymore. Like Elizabeth Olsen's been like, yeah, I'm glad with what we did, but I'm not going to be sitting there waiting for the phone call to come back. And other people are like, it's just acting in front of a green screen. Like Anthony Hopkins and stuff. And it's like, it's this dichotomy at the moment where nothing seems to be, like everybody just seems to be like sick of it, including the actors,
Yeah.
Get so that money, though.
Your favorite superhero team is a Fantastic Four. So you're a fan of the those early 2000s movies?
They were the ones that got me into it, Mitch. I'm telling you. I had like the special edition. I loved it. It
was at a perfect time. Yeah, I liked them when they came out too, because like around that time the Tobey Spider-Man movies were coming out, and there was like Daredevil with Ben Affleck. It was like, oh, it's the pre-MCU. It's like, oh, it's all coming together one day.
So
like,
many
we
films.
could get a movie when it crossover. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Good times. Yeah. I went back recently and like started that movie because I saw it was on Disney Plus. I was like, oh no, yeah. I'm good. I don't want to relive this. Let it be okay in my memory instead of like bringing it back to the surface and letting me see all the flaws. I don't
exactly.
One a trilogy that is pretty good though is the Blade movies.
Ooh, yeah.
Like the first and second one, like go pretty hard.
Yeah.
I heard that
Guillermo del Toro did the second one.
Yeah. I heard that the new Blade film is experiencing a lot of issues, rewrites, stuff like that.
Yeah. I think didn't the director walk away from it?
I believe so.
Yeah. It's going to be similar to Multiverse of Madness. I'm sure it's just not. Disney don't want it to go as dark as it is. It's going to be a powder puff version, unfortunately.
Yeah. I'm also worried about that a little bit with Daredevil. They're bringing that show back, obviously, because that was originally on Netflix and for a much more mature audience. And I think they said they're doing Punisher again as well. So I was like, I don't know how they're going to handle that, but we'll see.
We will see. Well, moving on from the superhero world.
Nerds.
Before we get
to say it's dying, we've spent 25 minutes talking about it.
I know, right? Before we get into the movie, though, I wanted to ask you about the Broken Lens Film Festival and if you're going to do that again this year.
Yes, yes. So I do plan on doing it again this year. I'm trying to lock down a specific date. I don't have that in mind yet. There is a location that is on the table. Um, so right now I'm in talks about the location because I don't know if you remember from when you were there, Brandon, but that was sort of like a farewell event to the location, mini cine.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
So that location isn't available to us now. So I've been talking to a couple people. I think we do have a decent location in mind. We just need to nail down a date because there are some other local film events that are going on this year as well, and make sure that we schedule it at a time that doesn't conflict with any of those things.
Yeah. And
So
for
still
listeners
planning.
who don't know, that's going to be in Shreveport. Obviously, you'll announce at some point, but if you want to follow Mitch on his social media channels, I think you're at Broken Lens Films, right?
Yes, yes, Broken
Cool.
Lens Films on Facebook, Instagram, any social pages, honestly. And then there is a podcast that me and my friend Cody used to do on Spotify called Wheel Inspectors as well.
Sweet.
So
Anything else that we should be excited about, or any rumors, things you're working on, or anything you want to talk about?
I will briefly mention, without giving away any plot details or spoilers, that I was in a Western this year. So we'll be on the lookout for that. My
Yeah, I
my
saw a couple of
breakout
your
role as a cowboy.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. I saw a couple of your pictures.
Yeah.
That looks fun. Excited to see it.
Yeah, I've been really interested in acting lately. Usually I'm behind the camera, but I've been trying that out recently and getting a lot of good feedback from it. So
Yeah,
that's
it's
that's
fun,
exciting.
right?
Something else to dive into.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you, dude. I recently did some acting, and like you, I'm traditionally behind the camera. But yeah, just something like, it's, for one thing, it's fun, it's fulfilling. I feel like um I can be myself doing that, and I feel passionate about it. But also just to like fill in the gaps, because it takes so much work and mental energy and time to create a project all on your own, from scratch, and get it into production and finished. That, like, it's nice to do something where it's like, oh, you just show up for a couple of days and read your lines, or memorize your lines, say your
Yeah.
lines, and then you can like check out. It's like
Yeah.
you don't have to.
Sit down between takes.
Yeah, eat something, go to the
Yeah.
bathroom. Yeah, so that's awesome, man. I can't wait to see that. Well, cool. I think it's time to get into the main sermon of today and move on to our feature presentation.
The end of the tour, 2015. Imagine the greatest conversation you've ever had. The story of the 5-day interview between Rolling Stone reporter David Lipsky and acclaimed novelist David Foster Wallace, which took place right after the 1996 publication of Wallace's groundbreaking epic novel, Infinite Jest.
Well, this movie, like I said at the beginning of the show, we've all seen it before. This was probably my second time watching it. I don't know how many times, Lewis, that you have seen it.
This is my second time, yeah.
Okay. And I imagine, Mitch, you've seen it probably much more times than that. But, when I was inviting you back on the show, you were trying to figure out what to pick, and you asked me if I had seen this film, and I was like, yeah. But I knew that, like, David Foster Wallace was kind of a big influence on you and an inspiration, so I was really hoping you would pick it. And I'm glad that you did, because, like, yeah, I think, as a filmmaker, or an artist, or just, someone who decides to go into the creative endeavors. Um, there's obviously lots of different people that influence us, but particularly it seemed like David Foster Wallace was a big influence on you. And I don't know that much about him other than like watching this movie and, watching a little bit of a couple of interviews and stuff. Um, but was he an influence on you before this movie? And like how did you get introduced to him, and where did all that come from for you?
Right. So my introduction to him was basically through this movie. Um, I have a friend. His name is Jonathan. He lives in New Zealand right now, but when he was still living in Shreveport, um, we actually met through a Facebook group for fans of Elephant Six Collective, which is this like underground music label that Neutral Milk Hotel was a part of and other stuff. So that kind of ties in with. I'll bring it all back and wrap it up in a nice bow. I promise. Like it sounds like I'm meandering. It sounds like I'm meandering, but my meandering is
It,
going someplace. He introduced me to David Foster Wallace. Kept talking about him, and it was like, yeah, there's this movie about him. And I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah, it's got Jason Segel, and I'm like, oh, I love that guy, and it sort of went from there. And then I saw like the trailer and the poster. I'm like, oh, I remember this because I think this was like 2017 around that time. So the movie was only like a couple years old. I'm like, yeah, no, I remember this. I just never saw it. Like, I'm gonna check this out. So I got the movie, and I was kind of like just blown away with it because like I found it to be extremely relatable. Like a lot of the conversations that they were having about like the nature of success and the American dream and fame and like anonymity and all sorts of things, which led me to read the book. And um, Infinite Jest, like it took me a minute to finish it because it is a long book. But I remember those days really, really fondly. Like it was before I had like a washing machine. I would have to go to the laundromat and I would sit there and read this book while I was doing laundry or just all throughout the day. It was one of those books that I just like. It was so easy to read. Like I would just pick it up and I didn't want to put it down, and I could just walk around and read it. And, um, I think that it came during a particular time where I was very easy to like influence too, and like the subject matter of the book, it deals a lot, obviously, with like if you read the book, you can tell like obviously he definitely understood depression from probably a really deep, intimate level, as we know. So he was able to describe certain things that I thought like only I had thought of, like not to say that like in some sort of like narcissistic way, like oh I've only thought of it, but like certain emotions or feelings, and I'm like oh I wasn't aware that other people struggle with that too, or had those same thoughts. So it was just like little lightning bolts going off, and extremely funny too. So ever since then, I've just had a strong connection with his work, and with that book in particular, and with the film in particular, because the film is what sort of introduced me to him. And I was hesitant to pick this film only because I wanted it to be something you guys hadn't seen before. But I went ahead and picked it because I do feel like it has flown under the radar a lot,
Mm.
especially like Jason Segel's performance here is something that I love to talk about with people. And they're like, "Oh yeah," usually most people is like, "I've never seen that film." Like I just recently lent one of my copies. I have like two copies of it to someone that I work with. So it's just like I spread the gospel of this
Yeah.
film. you
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, um, as often as I can. So yeah, I also worked on a short film that I wrote that was like a loose adaptation of Consider the Lobster, but we called it Consider the Crawfish. It's kind of like a twist
Mm.
on one of his books. Um, and my friend Jonathan, who introduced me to him, was also had a part in that. Um, Also, it was sort of like not to get into my stuff, but it was a sort of fictionalized historical fiction thing where I used Jeff Mangum from Neutral Milk Hotel as a character in the film as well. Um, and I think that there's an association between those two people because it's like David Foster Wallace is somebody that's kind of known for that one thing, and like Neutral Milk Hotel released like one major album that everybody remembers and just sort of quit. Um, and like also like Peter Jackson too. Like people pretty much know him for that one thing. So it's like I feel that on a personal level. Like I would like to accomplish like one thing, one solid thing that people know me for. At least as I can do that. If anything else, I still create work, but like I want that one, body of work that one, masterpiece that everybody refers to. It's like as long as you can get something and put all your effort into that one thing and crank out something amazing, then I don't know. I feel like that's the type of person that he was. So it's very relatable, I guess, to a lot of my own like personal goals and the way that I see um, art in general and like the cathartic nature of it and stuff and how it relates to me personally. So
Yeah. Yeah, I really like your film, by the way, Consider the Crawfish. You can find it
oh,
on YouTube.
thank you. It's terrible, but thank you. Thank you.
It's definitely not terrible.
Yeah, from
Uh,
a filmmaking standpoint, it's pretty good.
it's not though, but that's the thing is like I get the I get why you say that. I mean, because it's your own work and it's hard to like, look at it objectively and everything. Uh but yeah, I mean, I've seen it like 3 times now. I mean, it's only like 12 minutes or something, but it's like I really enjoy it, especially getting to know you more and stuff, and like I like and knowing that you were like filming that whole thing by yourself, like all the shots with you in the car, like it was literally just you. Um, and you can get like the only technical thing that might be wrong with it is like some of the audio issues, which like
Definitely.
you
Yeah,
can
definitely.
get around that. Like it's not hard to enjoy the movie even with
No, well,
those,
thank you. Thank you. I
like
appreciate it.
um so yeah, everybody should go watch that. It's on YouTube.
We'll link
Um,
it in the show notes as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. Um, and I'm excited to see what else you do. I definitely relate to that idea of like just wanting to make an impact.
Yeah.
Especially like when you've been doing it for so long and you've been chasing
But
something. You
right, but
know,
also the anonymity with it, because I think that's one of the things that you find out very early in the film too, where he's like, "How did you get this number?" Like I don't want people like showing up to my house. I don't want people knowing who I am. That sort of like dichotomy of it. It's where like I want to make an impact, but I also don't necessarily want credit for
yeah,
making the impact.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to accomplish something for the sense of accomplishment and hope that some people can like relate to it or
Yeah.
it enhances their life in some way. But I'm also like very reluctant to the idea of having any sort of like uh fame or anything like that. It's just a very uncomfortable thing. So like that's one of the other things that I appreciate about this movie so much is that there's a real discussion about that particular topic.
Yeah, there's
yeah,
a conversation I was having recently. My parents went to see Elton John, and there was like a full backing band for him. And I was like, it probably says a lot about my psyche, but to be a member of his backing band would be the perfect job for me because you're
Mm.
not the main one. You're not the one that anybody's looking at. You still get to play these awesome songs and like tour the world and like, give something over. It's like, to me, that's perfection, you know?
yeah,
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And that's something that like seeps into his work as well because what you were saying actually reminded me of a bit from the book Infinite Jest, where he describes like what he calls figurants, basically like extras. Like think of them like extras in an episode of Cheers or something like that. Like what are the people in the background doing and what are their lives like? And a
yeah.
lot of the chapters in the book are just like random explorations of people that normally would just be passersby in a scene, and it just
Yeah.
goes on and on about their life, and then we never hear from them again,
Mm.
sort of thing, or they're just briefly mentioned, sort of thing. So I think that sort of like idea that you were describing is something that Wallace was also feeling and experiencing as well, because it's just all over his work.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's such an interesting person. I mean, I remember liking the movie when I first saw it, but it's been enough years since the first time I saw it that I didn't remember a ton.
Mm.
Mhm.
And it is such a good movie. Like
Yeah.
it really is. Like and it's so good to see like I know it's like been 8 years now since the movie came out, which is kind of crazy. Like to me
Yeah,
it's still that like 2015 still seems like a couple of years ago, but
yeah,
Yeah.
me too. Yeah.
it's like what the heck. But like it is nice to see like a film in recent history just be like character driven and dialogue
Mm.
driven and be so interesting and good the whole
Mm.
time. Um but what about you, Lewis? Like
Yeah.
what was your experience watching this movie for the first time, and were you in the same boat where you like kind of forgot about it, and then like how do you feel about it now rewatching it?
Yeah, I mean, first saw it at the end of 2015, so pretty quickly after it was released. I was a really big fan of Jason Segel around that time. He kind of like Forgetting Sarah Marshall was around the same time, and then there was like the Muppets film that he did that I'm a massive fan of. So it was like this was it was a film that I was going to see, and I can remember really enjoying it. But if it wasn't for this show and for Mitch in particular, I probably would not have gone back to watch this. Not in terms of I didn't want to, but it just kind of disappeared from
Yeah.
my memory. It was as soon as you said, "Oh, it's the end of the time," I was like, "Oh, I've seen that." It was like that. I knew that I had seen it. I could remember that Jason Segel and Jesse Eisenberg was in it, but I don't think that I would have like gone back to it consciously. Um, and I'm glad that I did, because I think that, like you were saying, Mitch, that it kind of came at a point in your life where you kind of like related to it. Suddenly it's like I've got the book on order, Infinite Jest. I've got it on order from Amazon. I'm waiting for that package to arrive.
Really?
Like there's just like he sounds so interesting, and his like just the conversations through the outlook kind of speak to me now. So I'm not sure, because I don't think I did that much research when I watched it the first time. But now it's like an extra layer of like, I want to know more about this author.
Right. I did the same thing actually. Pretty much as soon as I saw the movie for the first time, I was like, I want to order the book now. Like I
Hmm.
want to, and I think the movie does a good job of creating like this mystique around the book as well, where they don't really reveal anything from the
Yeah,
book, just people reading it and going, "Wow,"
yeah,
so like, what's in this thing?
yeah,
Sort of like a lure that it creates for it without necessarily going into the
Yeah.
book at all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very clever in that way, especially like in the very beginning of the movie, because Jesse Eisenberg, his character is a writer as well, and he's like reading a review on the book, and he's just like, oh, like they're saying this, like how can
yeah,
it be
Yeah.
that good? And his girlfriend is like, maybe it is that good. I
yeah,
guess you'll just
Yeah.
have to read it. And then like the next scene is him reading it, and he's like, damn it.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Uh,
But
um,
yeah, I think to its credit, it says a lot that a film can basically be just a series of conversations and still be so
Mm,
interesting. But like what you were saying, Lewis, like it does feel like the more people I talk to about the film, they have a similar experience where it's like, oh yeah, I've heard of that or I've seen it, and then it just sort of leaves their
yeah,
consciousness really. And I'm not sure why that film has that effect on people, but I've noticed it to the point where like I thought like even Jesse Eisenberg, not Jesse Eisenberg, but Jason Segel, like his performance should have been more talked about.
yeah, yeah,
I thought he had some really great monologues, some really great scenes in the film as well. So I always like talking about this movie because I don't think it gets enough
no,
recognition.
yeah,
Absolutely, but it's also a movie that I've never heard anybody call bad. They're like,
no,
"Oh yeah,
yeah,
that was quite good," but like I don't really remember that. It's like it's got
yeah,
that kind of effect. I'm like, needs to be talked about more.
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I think I wonder if like I think the casting is perfect, but it's also very on the nose in a way.
Mm,
Like I mean, Jesse Eisenberg is just so Jesse Eisenberg in the
Oh yeah,
movie,
totally.
you know?
Yeah.
And, like, just, like, the part where he, like, has the tobacco in his mouth and he, like, goes in the bathroom, he's just like, you know, it's just, like, only Jesse Eisenberg can,
Yeah.
like, make that interesting. And then Jason Segel is, like, you know, he's known for kind of not this kinda thing. Like, I mean, he's known for being kind of, like, hippie and, like, you know, down to earth and stuff, but more comedy, more, you
Yeah,
know.
comedic actor. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
I know him from Freaks and Geeks.
I was going to say, this role reminds me of where his character in Freaks and Geeks would be, like 20 years down the line.
mhm,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
Like, I know that it's like David Foster Wallace is a real person, but I imagine that his character in Freaks and Geeks would end up, you know, somewhere like this.
yeah, yeah. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
Jesse Eisenberg. I'm not a fan of Jesse Eisenberg, but this was perfect casting because I was like, he plays a reporter that would be secretly writing down what you have in your medicine cabinet. That you're never sure if he's like serious or mocking you. You know, throughout the whole thing, just the way that he says things, I'm just like, this sounds. It could be taken either way.
Right.
Yeah,
He was perfect for that role for sure.
Yeah.
Very,
Mhm.
I think both of the characters that they were playing were neurotic for sure, but like in ways that like played off of each other very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
It was a really great example of showing both sides of fame. You know, the person that's reaching for the fame that the other person have, and the person that doesn't, that has achieved it, but then has the weight of, you know, what's next? Like, can he keep this up? You know, it seems to be fleeting. You know, there isn't a moment where it's like, oh, I'm famous now. It's kind of like, no, I've already got the weight of like what's next, and like I don't really want to be. You know, like you said, Mitch, you've got the success of like the book doing really well and getting really good reviews, but also you have the you know, people, the worry of people trying to call his house and like ruin his life that he's kind of built.
Right.
And then Jesse Eisenberg is obviously the character that's like, hey, I want what you have. I want to be seen as like this intelligent person that, you know, is better than everybody else.
Yeah, yeah, and perhaps some projection going on there as well. But it's got this very clear sort of like grass is always greener theme going on
Yeah.
there. It's like this is what you want, but this is what comes with it. You know, sort of thing. Which is really interesting because I feel like a lot of the things that Wallace was writing about and his character saying in this film were almost sort of like veiled self-criticisms, you know, because he has this very negative, low view of like technology and the internet, for instance, and television, and clear, unadulterated, you know, pleasure and stuff like that. Yet there's that scene like when he's getting ready in the motel room and he can't stop watching television, you know, which he references earlier. So it's like he's almost sort of like in the book as well, like rallying against the sort of addictions that he has, and like I think that's the reason that he was able to write so well about addiction, because he did a lot of research, you know, with different like NAs and stuff when he was writing, like Narcotics Anonymous members and stuff when he was writing Infinite Jest, and sort of relating it to entertainment and like that discussion about like seductive entertainment and stuff, and being sort of just like a victim to all these things, and like the best way that he knows how to sort of rationalize it or justify it, quantify it, if you will, is to like write this epic masterpiece about, you know, addiction and commercialism. Because I mean, I know you're about to read Infinite Jest, but there's so many themes in that book. Like, for instance, the each year is named after a different product that buys up that calendar year, and like a different product, like a Statue of Liberty, what she's holding every year, is replaced with a different product. So it's just very, very much a criticism on consumerism and stuff. But then there's all these scenes like when they're sitting at the mall talking about like, you know, there's this like lie and at the heart of all this stuff that was supposed to make us happy, and it's not.
Mm-hmm.
You can eat junk food all the time, go to the movies, go to the mall, do all this stuff, and we still have this like deep emptiness at the heart of
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
And what is that? So I think that while he didn't necessarily struggle with the things that people thought he did, like the heroin thing and all that kind of stuff, it's interesting to see sort of mundane things
Yeah.
being compared to things that people traditionally associate with addiction, and the idea that we're not taking these addictions as seriously as we should,
Mm.
like an addiction to television, or for example, because they're not as like taboo, but
Yeah.
they can be just as like destructive,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
almost like it's, I wouldn't say like a cry for help, but just like, hey, look, this is going on, and it's leading to a place that's not going to be good for anybody,
Mm.
and what do we do about it? It's like this train isn't going to stop, and
Yeah.
I think when a lot of people talk about Wallace, they talk about him as sort of being like one of the last of the great prolific authors, like comparing him to uh, you know older authors, because I think a lot of the literature that comes out today that's popular isn't very much like that. It's like we
Mm-hmm.
have like a lot of young adult literature and stuff like that, and I think because of that, a lot of more of like the adult literature and adult fiction has been sort of, I don't want to say dumbed down, but existed in this space where the same sort of space that like young adult YA novels exist. Um, so it's really interesting to think about it from that perspective too, like in like a Hemingway perspective or something like
Yeah.
that, like somebody who was out there doing this when it was coming to a close, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry, that was just rambling on for a couple
Preach.
minutes.
Yeah.
It's sort of all over the place, But
Yeah, well, I wonder how much influence he's had on the because a lot of these topics are popular today as far as
Mm.
like addiction to media, addiction to our
Yeah.
phones,
Yeah.
um, mental health,
mm,
loneliness. I mean, everybody's you know,
absolutely.
had to deal with that at a heightened level post COVID or during COVID, and
Mm,
post COVID, a lot of mental health issues. But we had those issues
Yeah.
before. It's just that like they're being talked about now in it's not as taboo, I guess. You know what I mean?
Mm.
mm,
Um, there's open conversations happening finally. There's not as much judgment towards just like having a therapist, going to
Yeah.
therapy, like
Yeah.
like good like therapy should be seen as a brain workout. People don't look at people going to the gym and are like, "Are you okay? Like,
yeah.
why are
Yeah.
you working on your body so much?" It's like it's healthy. That's why.
Right.
And like
Mm.
that's how people should seeing a therapist. It's healthy to work out your brain.
Mm.
Um and
Absolutely.
I don't know, like obviously I'm learning a lot right now through this conversation about David Foster Wallace. I would also like to read his book. I don't know if my I don't know if I'll be able to. Like,
Mm.
I mean, it took me years to read all of Lord of the Rings. And yeah, so like if I dedicate myself to reading a book, I know it's going to take a long time because
Yeah.
my brain is very ADD like that
Mm.
and probably gotten worse from my phone. But anyway, that's just going off on a tangent now. But I
Yeah.
wonder, maybe I don't know if you guys know. I just wonder like how much he's influenced people that are in the mental health
Mm.
field or talking about addiction to phones now and stuff. Because yeah, I mean, like this movie takes place in the 90s, and
Mm.
Mm,
like all the stuff that he's talking about has gotten so much worse.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Yeah. And
for
I
sure.
think that, bleeding from that, it's profoundly sad. It's a guy that knows his addictions, and like tries the best to deal with him. Like he doesn't own a TV because he just, as you know, from the hotel room, he'll just watch it all the time. When they're talking about heroin and stuff like that, he's talking about how he had hit the rock bottom and was looking for an alternative way to like deal with it, which is an incredibly sad and meaningful conversation. But also at the end where he offers David the option to kind of like keep in touch, and you just know that he didn't take it up on it. Like this was the last, conversation that they had, and that, he was reaching out to someone that he thought he had made a connection with, but at the end of the day, it is just
A job.
yeah. And that was the saddest part for me watching it this time, was someone that was, keeping him at arm's length, but really wanted to like get to know him as on a personal level and like, break those walls down and kind of have a friend.
Yeah, the filmmaking there is very, the filmmaking in this whole movie is clever and beautiful, but
Yeah.
yeah, right there in that moment, because they're able to communicate, like, because there's like him, uh, he has like says they should exchange information, and then
Yeah.
it like cuts to Jesse Eisenberg in the future listening to the tape,
Mhm.
and yeah, you just feel that weight of like, damn.
Yeah. Yeah, you
Um,
should have done it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think also going back to the filmmaking, the cinematography is just very sort of like, I wouldn't say shaky cam, but that
Mm.
sort of like docu style. And I think mixed with like the really genuine performances, like it's really the perfect film for that type of cinematography. I don't always like when the shaky cam sort of stuff is used, or handheld stuff,
Yeah.
especially like in action heavy scenes. But for this type of film, I think that it really sold, like it felt genuine, and like helped sell that like genuine feeling like around the film, and like the like what you were saying, like where it cut in certain places was really impactful.
Yeah.
And I think that's important when you're dealing with a film that's just basically about a conversation. It's very
Mm.
important where you cut, and what themes you decide to bring out of it at certain times. So I think they did a great job with that. I think they did a great job with addressing mental health and like suicide and stuff like that without being well, with a certain amount of like subtlety and respect towards
Yeah.
towards the
Yeah.
topic without going into too much detail about it.
yeah.
Um, yeah, but definitely, I think um, like you were saying, like a lot of the issues that he addressed are getting worse, and you hate to think about it, but like would that have impacted him in an even worse way, as time went on,
Mm.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
But like you were saying, like these topics are super like relevant now, especially as I think we've gone into an age where that taboo label is being stripped from like mental health and stuff, and we're able to talk about it more openly as like sort of a like, yeah, like I mean, the say it, like putting it in the same categories like physical health, like you wouldn't, like just take
Mm.
care of yourself. um, and to know that he has had like an impact over people like me, at least, who related to what he had to say, and like chose to seek out help or seek out therapy and things like that, is a great positive like impact, I think, that he's
Yeah.
had on a lot of people's lives. So there's a part of me that wishes that he he had known that, because like even David Lipsky, when he was going back through the tapes and interviews, like I mean there was a connection there. It's just like when you, especially as an adult, like I've heard so many people say this, like it's so hard to make friends, or like we get so caught up in our own lives that we care about people, but we don't take the time to stop and like tell them,
Mm-hmm.
all the times that we were thinking about them, or let them know like how impactful they have been over our lives. So I think that's very important, and something to take from that film as well is just like remember to tell people in your life who mean something to you that they're meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is very
Yeah.
important.
Because obviously, he gets at the beginning of the film, David Lipsky gets a phone call from a friend that's like, "Hey, I thought you would have known, but David Foster Wallace is dead." So, like, the people around him obviously know the impact that it had on David. That they know enough to give him a call after this one interview, which I assume would have been one of many in his career.
Yeah.
But he's still like, it's just that sad kind of, like you were saying, Mitch, he should have reached out before and kind of, kept that relationship going, kind of thing. And in terms of like the technology, I mean, we're like even one step further on than this now. It's the point where I have to put my phone somewhere else when I watch a movie, so that I'm in the movie,
Yeah.
which is ridiculous. What's going to be next? We're going to have to like, I don't know, like put something away, like the VR headset,
Bro,
so that we're not, so that we can put our phone away to watch a movie. It's
literally, I was talking to someone, and age doesn't necessarily have anything to do with this, because I'm highly addicted to media.
Same.
But I was talking to a person that was about 10 years younger than me, late teens, early 20s, that I was working with, and they were like, they understand their addiction too, but but they were like, yeah, I like was playing a video game, had YouTube up, and I was watching a movie. I was like, what?
Yeah.
But I do stuff like that sometimes. Like I'll be watching a movie and I'll pull up my phone all the time, all the time, or just crazy like that. Like we think we need to be multitasking all the time, and it's like, no, just
turn it off. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's kind of how we're wired right now, is to be constant multitaskers. It's like it's the only way to be like at least somewhat successful in the world is to be able to juggle several things at once, and it's really hard to turn that off when it's just yourself and you're like, this is my time. It's sort of hard to flip that switch and be like, I don't have to multitask so many things. But then like in that realm as well, it's like you have people saying like, you have to see this, you have to play this, you have to listen to this, like and so then your free time sort of ends up feeling like work time as well, which is a terrible feeling. So it's important to be able to like just focus on one thing, and I do that too sometimes. Like I'll just turn the phone off or put it in another room or like let it charge, or and try to be absorbed as much as I can into one thing. And that's really the reason why I love going to the theater to see a film as well. Like in that cathedral of film there, because like the lights go out, it's huge, it's loud, and it's so much easier to like forget about everything else, like when you step in there, like as opposed to watching a movie like in your house and like you said, your phone is right there, and like maybe I'll look this up too, and then you realize you're watching the movie but not like absorbing it completely. You're like, I have no idea what they just said, I could rewind it, or I could just let it go and get the gist of it, like that's bad. Like I remember I used to never do that. Like if I didn't get something or I didn't hear something, I was like, wait, I always rewind it or like pay attention to it. And like the older I've gotten, the more I'm like, this isn't something that's like, necessarily like I'll get the gist of it. Like I understand what's going on, because there's so much to absorb. Like you don't really have the time to slow down and be like, what was this line of dialogue in this one episode of this show that I'm like behind on, and then I have all these other shows that I need that are on the queue, after that. So it really has become a task, and I think when you watch a film like this and hear David say those things, you're like, whoa, this is super relatable to today. And like the TV thing, like, I mean, obviously I have a TV. I'm not going to get rid of my TV, but like I didn't grow up with a TV in my room, for instance. So I don't really have a TV in my room. I don't really watch TV in my room. If I'm going to go to my room, it's for sleeping, or I'm going to like lay down in the bed and read a book or something, so I try to cultivate those spaces, but it's really hard and difficult in today's world to do that, because it is getting so much worse in that aspect. And like, I'm not like a Luddite or a hater of technology, but I think it's just like anything, too much of a good thing could be a bad thing, or it just depends on how it's wielded, how it's used, sort of like a weapon. It's like, it's not the thing itself, it's how it's used. And at least having a discussion about how to use it responsibly is important. I think,
Yeah.
that I think that's a topic that a lot of people just don't really consider too deeply. Like, oh,
Yeah.
that's what I do. I'm a couch potato. I sit and watch things all day and whatever. Like me too. I'm definitely guilty of that. But I've tried to be more like selective now as I'm older. Like especially back when I was doing the podcast with my friend Cody. Like, and even when we were at college together, we would go see two movies a week because he used to work at the theater, and so he had 2 free passes. And I was just seeing so many films and trying to catch up on all the latest like streaming shows.
Yeah.
And it just started it starts to feel like it's like your job
Yeah.
to keep
Keep
up
up.
with all this stuff.
Mm.
Yeah. And I think now I've chosen to be like a lot more selective with what I give my time to, and try to like curtail that feeling of like that I'm missing out. It's like that
Yeah.
FOMO thing I think that people talk about, fear of missing out. It's like, I didn't watch this or I didn't do this, and now I'm missing out on this conversation that could potentially happen with people who have also seen this thing, and try to like curtail that anxiety a little bit, by just
Yeah.
saying, hey, like this is what I'm into, and this is how I would rather be spending my time, than just consuming stuff all the time. So I think
Yeah.
it's an important conversation to be had, and David Foster Wallace reminds us of that a lot, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, just like one of the last scenes, when he comes in there, when David Lipsky is like in his bed and like Wallace comes in and he's like, "Hey, are you awake?" And I had to
Mm.
rewind it a couple of times because like, what is he saying? Like, uh, and also my phone
With
was
the
right there.
subtitles on.
Yeah, with the subtitles
Oh,
on.
your phone was right there. You're
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
I'm
and
sorry, David.
yeah, and he's like talking about how he's like and I don't know if I necessarily agree with him completely, but he's like people can't really change. He's like I don't really believe that anybody really changes, and he's like I'm always uh trying to make sure that that old version of me, I'm not letting it drive or something
Mm.
like that. Like
Yeah.
he's constantly battling his addicted self, like, and trying
Yeah.
not to let that drive what he does next. Um,
Mhm.
which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, the ending of the movie is beautiful. Like I don't know if I've like I mean they just stick the landing so well, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's such a beautiful ending and a like great way to like picture David Foster Wallace because you know that he committed suicide. You go
Mm.
into the movie knowing that at the beginning, and obviously he did struggle a lot. That like loneliness is a big theme in the movie, and discussing loneliness openly,
Yeah.
and to end the movie seeing him dancing in the Baptist church, and
Yeah.
just like you get this feeling of like you know s- like I think we all have experienced depression, like we can all
Yeah.
relate to that.
Yeah.
And we know what that feels like, and we all know what loneliness feels like. And to
Yeah.
see someone who feels those things so deeply experiencing like pure joy,
Yeah.
like the ending of this movie, like just it just makes me cry, like because but it's not out of like sadness.
Yeah.
It
Mm.
is because you know that he committed suicide, but it's out of knowing that someone who was lonely and depressed had moments of pure joy, you know?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
just so beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's such a perfect way to end up the film, and that's what I was saying earlier about like how it was very respectful to that theme as well. Because, like you said, just seeing joy and happiness, and leaving you with that feeling, is like hopeful, and that's also what I meant when I was like, hey, like even though he did commit suicide, his discussions about depression, to people who are depressed, can help us latch onto those things and actually move past it. Because even though he wasn't able to get there himself, I feel like he has been able to help other people along, which is really interesting to me, because there's not a lot of examples of people who have been able to do that. I feel like usually when we talk about people who have done that, it's in a way where like their work or their body of work hasn't necessarily, I would say, like necessarily encouraged people to improve their mental health. But it's another dichotomy. I feel like it's just like here's somebody who struggled very deeply with these things, so much so that he ended his own life. But his words and his examples in his works are really therapeutic and cathartic to people who are struggling with mental health issues, at least for me specifically, and sort of helped me see things from a different perspective, right? Because I think AA is they kind of teach that thing where it's like you can't change, right? Like you're always an addict, you're always an alcoholic, and the only thing that you can do is just like not let it drive. Essentially, you just say no to it and just live with it continually, which I get, but also I think that can be like a negative way to view the world as well, like unchangeable, like because like even in that conversation he said like my old self. I'm like, well, that implies that you were this thing and that you changed into this thing. So I don't know. I think that I can see a lot of ways in which like his philosophies and things that he believed like hindered certain other things, what he was trying to get to this I don't really know what I'm trying to say here. um, anyway, I think you guys
But the
understand what
like
I'm saying.
continual
Yeah,
improvement, like
continual improvement, right, is a sign of change, and that things can be changed. In other
Yeah.
words, so there is hope in that, and that last image of joy is, I think, a testament to that,
yeah,
right?
I
Like,
think I think
hey,
maybe the things that don't change are maybe like your weaknesses. What you're susceptible to.
right?
What the holes that you could fall down.
Yeah.
Mm.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry.
No, 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 no. That's basically exactly what I was trying to say.
Yeah. Um. So another thing that I kind of wanted to get into, maybe just for a little bit, was that the topic of loneliness and how it relates to artistry.
Hmm.
Um,
Mm.
like it seems like it goes hand in hand. Like, do you think it goes in hand in hand? And like, I know for me, when I've really been passionate about a project or something that I'm working on, I have kind of had to make it the number one thing in my life and just focus on that. And, all my free time is spent working on that. And I've kind of stepped away. I mean, I've accomplished a lot of things. I mean, I had to do that when I was like working on my feature film script, and it was like a whole year of just all my free time I was in that world just trying to do that.
Mm.
And other areas of my life suffered for it, like relationships with people and things. And um, and so like I've tried to not do that, but also, I mean, I think I'm being very critical of myself right now, and I think a lot of people, creative people do this. But yeah, I'm like, okay, well, I've tried to create a new balance, and um, but I was going to say that my creative side has suffered for it because I haven't forced myself to be alone and work on things. But at the same time, I'm like, actually, I've been consistently doing this podcast for a year and a half. I've been working on projects. I've still been writing.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe that's not true. I don't know. Is loneliness a part of the process? Do you have to isolate yourself?
I think,
So, go ahead.
yeah, yeah. I was just going to say, I think in terms of writing and in terms of, it's such a singular act that it's hard not to isolate yourself from other people. Like there's only you, like it's going on in your head, only you can kind of find the words to put down. So I think when it comes to writing, yeah, like loneliness does come with it because you have to be, away from it. But we're also, the ideas as creatives that you have are born out of the experiences that you have, right? Like it's kind of, they shape you into what the kind of things that you want to make. So I don't think that being creative necessarily means loneliness comes hand in hand, but I think that maybe being lonely funnels itself into creativity as a flip side.
Yeah, definitely. I think that if you are lonely, there's a higher chance that you will find creative outlets to pursue.
Mm.
Like, what do I do here, while I'm by myself? But I don't think that like creativity and loneliness necessarily have to go hand in hand. I guess like there is a different sort of loneliness when you feel like a lot of people know who you are, but don't really know
Mm.
anything
Yeah.
about you, you know? Um, but that's really a more discussion about fame. But when it comes to like creativity in general, I think Lewis, what you were saying is true. It's just like because it's something that starts off for you in your head, you have to spend time with it.
Yeah.
But I think there is a tendency for creative types to romanticize that loneliness, and I think that's where some of the potential danger comes from. At least for me personally, I'm speaking very openly here. There have been times where I've thought like, "Hey, my loneliness and my pain are really the only things that make me creative. So I need to like seek out a type of lifestyle that makes me lonely."
Yeah, or, like,
Which
seek out
is
suffering or, like
yeah, because that's going to make me deep somehow, or
Yeah.
that's going to create better art. And I think that is destructive. That's
Mhm.
not I think the romanticizing of the loneliness is the dangerous part. But if you can sit with yourself and treat it as like an exercise, it's like I'm going to create this thing and spend a certain amount of time by myself, and then once this is over, then I can share it with the rest of the world or not, you know.
Yeah.
Um, then you've successfully like made that balance. But it is difficult because I think that like if you make something really good and you look at that thing and you say, "Hey, I was in a really dark place when I wrote this,"
Mm.
or created this thing. It's like, well, if I can somehow recreate that, then I'll make something else that is also good. And so I don't know if that's actually this is not exactly the conversation that we started out with, but I guess I'm relating it to me personally. Like it's very important to remind myself that like you know human interaction is important and like isolation is can be dangerous no matter
Yeah.
how creative it makes you, and that there is a different type of art that you can make um, depending on your mood, and it doesn't always have to be like something born from pain.
Yeah.
Instead of just using creativity as an outlet to express your pain, I think is a great thing. It's just when it becomes like I said, a romantic thing with your pain or your loneliness, is where I think that it can be destructive.
Yeah.
But I don't think it necessarily goes hand in hand. I think that I've seen like lots of examples of creative types who, have families and blossoming social lives as social
Yeah.
butterflies, and they still find time for themselves to be creative. But definitely, the creative process is something that you have to start for yourself and be alone in that space for at least a certain amount of time,
Yeah,
Mm.
for initial
while
ideas
you're
and
getting
stuff.
it out of it. So it's definitely, I don't know. It's loneliness is the key word here because just being alone doesn't necessarily mean you're lonely. So I guess it depends on what your life is like outside of your creative driving force, right? Like what else are you doing in your life? Like, okay, you spend a lot of time with yourself while you're being creative. And then when you're not doing that thing or devoting your time and energy into that one thing, what else are you doing in your life?
Yeah.
Are you continuing to isolate? Are you continuing to be alone? Are you denying yourself experiences to be around other people simply because you feel like you work better as a lonely person, so at least those are things that I've personally struggled with.
Yeah.
It's like but I think it takes a certain amount of maturity to move past that, and to like move past that really like potentially pretentious sort of like idea about pain and loneliness and art and
Yeah.
stuff. But it can be difficult when it's become part of your like like personality. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, I think of myself as this type of person, and now I don't want to be this type of person. And what steps can I take to achieve both happiness and creativity,
Yeah.
and being able to sit with myself without loneliness, or this deep sadness, being able to be by myself, which I think requires you to go out and be at least sociable sometimes, and do other things, and have new experiences, so that there is that balance, so that when you sit alone with yourself, you're not completely depressed, you know.
Yeah, that's very well put. I'm glad that you said that, because I definitely, as I've gotten older, have kind of matured in that area, and thinking that I need to suffer or be alone or something. But like,
Mm,
in recent years have found a lot of joy in collaborating creative with other creative people, and um, people that have also been through the same things, or just people that have joy in creating things, and just bouncing ideas, or even if it's not collaborating, but just like, hey, here's my idea, what do you think? And then them sharing their idea and me giving them feedback, without getting my hands in their thing or them getting their hands in my thing, just
mm,
being able to openly share things, and kind of, um yeah, that's so important, to just
yeah.
share and have that human connection, and
And filmmaking is really great for that, because you do spend that time. If you are writing, your script with the intention of having it made into a film, then you are spending that time alone with yourself initially, writing the thing, and then all of a sudden you're thrust into this completely different world where you have to explain your vision to a whole crew of different people who have different jobs, and you're seeing this come to life, and you're sort of forced to collaborate, because filmmaking is such a collaborative process. Like, there's no way you can just make a film by yourself,
yeah,
so I think that's one of the reasons that I enjoy film so much, is because it does have that balance of, like, if you're going to write something, you spend that alone time. Now the alone time is over, and now it's time to dive into collaboration as part of the same process. And I think that's one of the reasons why I enjoy filmmaking so much, is because it feels like personal and social all at once, which I think we can really relate to, because like just watching those films at the festival, for instance, like every story was just so personal, like
yeah,
especially yours and mine, it's like very, very personal, yet we're sharing this personal thing with others. It's just this weird mix of like the personal and the public all together, and I think being a filmmaker is something that helps with that balance a lot,
yeah,
because I feel like if my main goal was to just be like an author or something, like like David Foster Wallace, like I would spend way more time by myself and not discussing what I was doing with the amount of people that I discuss it with. Like, I'm sure you discuss things with, like, your publisher and stuff like that, and a few collaborators or people whose opinions you trust. Um, but again, like when you're working with a film, it's just so much more expansive, and I think it provides a great opportunity for both ends of that spectrum. Because I don't know. There's been times when like I've written something and then jumped into making it, and I'm like, wow, I'm totally unprepared to be dealing with so many people at once, and now I have to sort of switch. over to social mode,
Yeah,
and now I was in writing mode, and now I'm in social mode. But it's good. It's good for the soul.
yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
that's why it's our religion, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, do you guys have anything else about end of the tour to end the podcast? Any final thoughts or anything?
Um, Something that I thought about, because it was kind of briefly mentioned earlier about the final interview. The final interview actually never got published in Rolling Stone.
Mm.
Oh,
So, like, all of the material for that was used to write his book, David Lipsky's book
oh, okay.
about
Wow.
Wallace. So, yeah, like, he ended up getting back to Rolling Stone, and they were like, "No, we want you to write about Shannon Hoon, who had just passed away." From like Blind Melon and all that stuff going on. So it actually never, reached the light of day until I think that whenever that book was published, and he used all the material to write that book.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
yeah, I just thought that was an
Yeah.
interesting
Yeah.
tie-in.
And did the book come out, I guess, after he passed, maybe?
I believe so.
That would make sense, because that's what he's like reading at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And I guess probably what the movie is based on, too.
Yeah, I think that
Yeah,
it's based
it was
on that
2010.
book. Yeah.
Yeah, 2010 is when the book came out, and Wallace passed away in 2008, I believe.
Mm.
Yeah.
So yeah, a couple of years.
How about you, Lewis?
I mean, just that I think it's not an overly cinematic film, but if you're looking for a movie, where it kind of deals with these questions that we've kind of been talking about for the whole show, but on a very one-to-one basis, then this is the film for you. I don't think that it tries to tackle something that's bigger than itself. It does it all on a very personal level, and I think people should try and track it down if you can.
Yeah, it's
And
on
just kind
HBO
of
Max
enjoy
right
it.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I keep
Yeah,
doing
no
that. Yeah, this movie, when you try to describe it to someone who doesn't know about it, it's a little bit of a hard sell. Like, I was trying to talk to my sister and my brother-in-law last night about it. I was like, "Do you guys want to watch End of the Tour with me?" I'm like, "What is that?" And I was like, "It's a movie with Jason Segel and Jesse Eisenberg." And they're like, "Okay, I'm interested." And I was like, "It's about an author who wrote a famous book about loneliness and then committed suicide." And they're like, that doesn't sound that
Yeah.
fun."
Yeah.
Yeah, I
But
can see why that's a bit of a hard sell. Yeah.
it is really, really, really good.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it does have moments of comedy and yeah, it's just
Yeah.
For sure. And again, I think that the way it tackles that subject matter isn't like necessarily like in your face, or like you were saying, it has moments of humor, enough moments of humor to like dispel that a
yeah,
little bit.
the
Like, it is
movie isn't
entertaining to watch.
yeah, it's not just like this dark, depressing, sad movie, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like, I know we're trying to wrap it up here, but like even now, after Infinite Jest has been published and there's been films and discussions about him, like he still maintains this sort of like relative anonymity if you're not necessarily in these like literary groups who discuss authors all the time. You may not have any idea who he is, which is really interesting. So I think this film is probably the most like prominent pop culture in terms of like films go, like reference to him. So like that's usually what I start with, because it's what got me into him. But then like John Krasinski did a film called Brief Interviews with Hideous Men, which is also based on a David Foster Wallace book. I think one thing that I wanted to say too, like about the relevance of all these topics today, is that like I think it would make a great like, I think the book, it's considered unfilmable, but like a great like 10-part like mini series or something like that. I don't know if you guys watch The Office, but Michael Schur one of the creators, co-writers on The Office, actually owns the film rights
Wow.
to Infinite Jest. And so I'm just sort of like sitting there thinking, like, when are you going to do something with that?
Yeah.
If ever.
Yeah.
So like, if you are also fans of The Office, or anybody like watching or listening is, you'll remember that like Michael's boss is named David Wallace, and there's like
Yeah.
a lot of references in there. So like, now that you know that, and he's like in your brain, if you were to come back and watch that, you'll like notice like much more references to his work and stuff.
Wow.
That's crazy.
So yeah, that's kind of a little bit of a dream of mine, is to like adapt that into some sort of like a mini series or something, because everybody says that it's unfilmable, and I'm like, I could do it. Like,
Yeah. Well,
it's so presumptuous, so arrogant.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're also
It's just, I could see how to do it in my mind. It would be so great, you know.
yeah, man.
But
I
I think a
mean,
lot of people would appreciate like this. Aside from that, like little tangent I went on, I think a lot of people could really relate to this film in 2023. You know, so definitely check it out if you haven't seen it, especially if you like Jason Segel, because I think this is one of his best performances. You know, and
yes.
like we were saying, like I liked him since Freaks and Geeks, and like also forgetting Sarah Marshall, and like pretty much anything that he's in. I really enjoy, and I think this is a role for him that was definitely outside of the norm for him. So if you're interested in him as well as an actor, I would definitely say seek this film out, because he does a great performance as well, and like Jesse Eisenberg too. But like we said, Jesse Eisenberg kind of plays Jesse Eisenberg,
Yeah.
which is perfect for the role. You know?
Yes,
But,
exactly. Okay, so let's guess what each of us rated the film on our Letterboxd accounts. I'm gonna say, I mean, Mitch, it's got to be 5 out of 5, obviously.
yeah.
Lewis, I think it is. I'm gonna say 4.5.
Okay. I'm going to go with the same for Mitch. I think it's 5 out of 5. And I'm going to say 4.5 for you as well, Brandon. That's what I've been
Okay.
thinking throughout this conversation.
I think, Lewis, you probably rated it 4.5. Not sure. I'm not sure, Brennan. Did you rate it 5? That's what my guess is going to be.
I did rate it 5. It was gonna be 4,
Yeah.
and then the end, they just stuck the landing, and I
Yeah.
mean, I bawled at the end, and I
Yeah.
was just like, man. I was like Jesse Eisenberg at the beginning of the movie. I was like, damn it.
Yeah. It's the emotion when it gets me. Like I'm like 5 stars. Like I'll just be weeping on Letterboxd. Like it did it for me.
So I mean, yes, 5 for you too, right? That's what you rated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
What about you, Lewis?
I gave it a 4. And not, it's going to sound like I didn't like it. I really liked it. I think where it, like stops it being a 5 is, as we talked about, I mean, Jesse Eisenberg playing himself. It's kind of, I don't like him. And just, I think, you just want more conversation between the two. I feel like there's a little bit of time where I'm just like, I just want to see them in the car again. I just want to, I want more of it.
Yeah.
I guess. But I mean, it's very minor stuff. But definitely
just watch it again. You'll get more of it.
Yeah, I know. It's definitely something I'm going to go back and watch again soon.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. So you said like initially it wouldn't have been something that you would have gone back and rewatched, but now since you watch it again, it is something that you would gravitate towards?
I think it's just more in my consciousness now.
Right.
I think that I watched it at a time where I don't think it spoke to me on the same level. And I still gave it, the same rating. I still enjoyed it, I think, at the time, but it didn't speak to me on the same level.
Sure. It just feels so much more relevant now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe it's because we're a bit older too, and we've had to been through a few more things. Maybe, I don't know.
Been through a couple pandemics and other global
couple of world crises.
Yeah.
Like cool. Well, it doesn't necessarily need to be stated, but because of this movie, I want to state this. I love you guys. You're both important people to me. Thank you for being here. This was a great conversation.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I also want to say I love you guys and thanks for having me on the show again, because
Of
it's
course.
always great to be here and talk with you guys. And also because I'm not doing my podcast right now either. We're kind of like workshopping that, figuring out what to do. It's nice to have that human interaction and talk
Yeah.
about movies, and actually have a great discussion with two other people who really enjoy films the same way I do. So thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.
I appreciate these opportunities for sure.
Yeah,
man.
Brandon, you and I have both spoken a lot off mic just about how this has really helped us mentally deal with being creative and not having that outlet. So yeah, I feel the same way.
Yeah. All right. What are we watching next week?
Next week, we are going to be watching Mulholland Drive from 2001, a David Lynch film that me and you have both, I think, had varying degrees of success with David Lynch. So it's someone that I really want to jump into, and this is the most acclaimed of them all, I believe. So
Yeah, and neither one of us has seen it.
Exactly.
Wow.
First time watches. So here we go.
You're in for a treat.
Yes.
I've definitely seen Mulholland Drive. I can't wait for you guys to watch it.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm
I can
excited.
discuss it with.
All right, y'all. This brings us to the end of the show. But of course, if you want to keep it alive for the rest of the week, you can listen to our back episodes streaming on all good podcast platforms, especially Spotify, where I should have mentioned at the beginning of the show, we've got video. You can see Mitch's face. You can see our faces. You can also find us on all the social media channels at Film Church Radio, or you can follow us individually on Letterboxd. I am at Selman Scope. Lewis is at Walker Lewis 3007, and Mitch, you're at
Broken Lens Films.
All right. Yeah. So thanks for being here, listeners. We hope to see you next Sunday for more Film Church Radio. The only thing left to say is,
I'm not saying watching TV is bad or a waste of your time, any more than masturbation is bad or a waste of your time. It's a pleasant little way to spend a few minutes, but if you're doing it 20 times a day, if your primary sexual relationship is with your hand, something is wrong.
yeah, except with masturbation, at least some action is being performed, right? That's better?
Okay, you can make me look like a real dick if you print this.
No, I'm not going to, but if you can, speak into the mic.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen.